Hello, and welcome to Rob from the Internet Talks About Beer. Sure, we discuss different styles of beer, beer history, beer flavor profiles. We give shout outs to breweries we think make exceptional beer, and we talk about whatever else comes to mind during the course of the conversation. I'm your ever intrepid host, Rob from the Internet. Let's talk about beer. All right, joining me today is someone I would consider a friend. He's also been an instructor for me. This is Scott Boyle. Scott, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into craft beer, and what you do when you're not talking or drinking craft beer.
Well, Rob, thanks and foremost for having me on the show. Yes, my name is Scotty Boyle. I'm actually known also as the Bald Beer Guy. Beer is basically in part of my life now. Getting into beer started back in about 2013-14 with the LCBO. What I kind of did was worked as a Christmas help, and my manager at the time said, "Hey, just work in the beer section." So he kind of threw me back there, and I realized that I really didn't know anything about beer, nor did very few people around me. So I was introduced to a program called Prud'homme Beer Certification in 2014. I took my level 1, and my very first class, I absolutely fell in love with it. 4 years later, I took my level 4 Master Sommelier, and now I'm actually teaching level 1, and starting hopefully in the fall of this year, be teaching level 2 Prud'homme here in the Hamilton and Niagara area.
Nice. Yeah. For people who aren't familiar, Prud'homme is the beer certification here in Canada that's pretty much analogous to the Cicerone program in the United States. It's named after I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Prud'homme. Louis Prud'homme, yes. I took my level 1 certification class with Scott as my instructor. It was a great time. Level 1 focuses more on the social aspect of the beer scene, being able to talk about beer and being able to describe beer properly and things like that. It was a fantastic class. Made some new friends. Had an existing friend in the class, and you learn a whole lot about beer, and you get to learn about one of the things that it really taught me was how people's palates can be so different. Like, I might get some flavors out of a beer, but you might get something completely different, and it's all based on the way our bodies are set up, which is really cool.
Absolutely, yeah. Palate is one of the hardest, probably the hardest, elements when it comes to beer tasting. I just finished a class literally 2 weeks ago, and going back to my original class, I'll never forget, was Nick was my original level 1 instructor. And our first class is what we kind of do is we taste an Irish stout, which is usually Guinness. We taste a Helles, which is usually Gaffel Kolsch. What else do we do? And then an English ale, and then we do an IPA. And I was a diehard Canadian Coors Light drinker in the past. Everyone, after the baseball, hockey games, you had your Coors Light, you're Canadian, and you didn't really know any better. And again, don't get me wrong, they're phenomenal beers. They're just not everybody's cup of tea. Obviously, the biggest sellers, however. So obviously, suddenly, Nick, I'm actually just going to get out the can because it was one of my favorites. Nick introduced this beer for me. It was the Bone Shaker from Amsterdam, IPA, and I was like, wow, that looks interesting. He pours it. I took a sip, and I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked, thinking, how can a beer have so much flavor in one little can? And at the time, I said, someone asked me, what does it taste like? And I said, beer. Because I had no palate. I just all remember just saying it tastes like beer. It was a different beer, but it tastes like beer. So, like I said, from there, it's just basically training your palate, and you slowly get better at it. It really comes to it because you start thinking of, your childhood. A lot of smells trigger memories in your childhood. One thing was big with me was, for instance, burnt molasses. So a lot of stouts and porters, or even Doppelbocks, stronger Belgian ales, even, you get a kind of a molasses smell. And it brings me back to my childhood because my mother, when she baked, she used to use molasses all the time. So the smelling of the house, all of a sudden when I smell certain beers, it literally at certain times it has brought a tears to my eye for the fact that, I'm thinking about my mom because of that smell. So it's pretty interesting. And like I said, just my last class, a couple of guys in the very first class, they, as we're talking about beer, they said, what are you smelling? What are you tasting? And their answer was beer. So it's hard to come by. You have to train your palate, and it makes a difference of what you've eaten that day. What if you're a smoker, if you have, a cup of coffee or 10 cups of coffee, everything's piling onto your taste buds. So therefore, I like to, before perhaps a tasting, I actually get a tongue scraper, scrape the tongue, give it a good brush to the teeth, and, get that breath fresh. And then you start getting into it. But yeah, it definitely comes with time. Working on your palate is probably the hardest and worthwhile things to definitely work on when it comes to beer tasting.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I started drinking beer at a very early age. Beer has been part of my family for a long time. I had an uncle who may or may not still be a brewer at Coors. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him in several years because I'm a bad family member. But beer has always been a thing in our family. And, if we were visiting my grandma on my dad's side, if you walked into the kitchen while she was cooking, it was either you were there to help or hand her a beer. And so you learned a little bit about beer, but I didn't really start working, thinking about the palate and the flavor profiles of beers until I was probably in college. And everyone was drinking, Coors, and everyone was drinking Miller and Bud. And I tried Killian's Irish Red,
Yeah.
which was just another Coors product at the time, but it had a different flavor profile. It had more of that English red, Irish red ale flavor profile. So it was a different type of sweetness and a different type of bitterness than you get from other beers. And I was like, wow, this is good. And like you, I was like, well, yeah, it tastes like beer, but it's different beer. And from there, then I started trying to figure out what the flavors were and things like that. And now I'm at a point where, like, I'll pick up a beer. I'm like, yeah, this is grainy and bready and and it's got caramel and chocolate and you might get a hit of licorice. And people are like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I'm actually taking my professional fromager course at George Brown College right now, so I'm doing cheese. So again, working on my palate and my nose constantly. And I find with cheese, you find a lot of mushroom flavors, but then you also find a lot of real off flavors, like some very potent smelling cheeses. So it's between the beer and the cheese, my palate's constantly working and my head's constantly going. But it's funny that you say that. Sorry, I just lost my complete train of thought there when we talked about yeah. Talking about beer. I remember back in college, I went to school in the States and we were drinking Stegmeyer from Philadelphia. We would get 24 bottles for $4.99. Then we would get 5 cents back per bottle. So do the math. It was absolutely, I can't even remember the beer, but I just remember waking up with a hangover every morning after drinking it. Was it too many? Perhaps, but I think it was just very bad brewed beer at the time. But again,
Yeah.
we're going back, 30, 40 years ago. And so and again, you just drank beer back in the day for usually getting drunk,
Yeah.
Now I think for me, it's tough having a beer, because so many things are going through my head. Especially if it's a new one that I never had, I'm starting to think of what's in it. What flavors am I getting? What hops are in it? What can I pair it with? So I start breaking it down instead of just sitting back and enjoying the damn thing.
Yeah.
So it's nice. So for me now, having a beer is, quite nice because I like to try to drink, ones that I've had in the past. I don't have to think about it. Like I'm really into Belgian beers. So, very flavorful, lots of profile to them. And you don't have to worry about it, because I've had it in the past. And so I just sit there and enjoy it. So it's quite nice now.
Yeah,
But
speaking of Belgians, I was just recording an episode prior to this, and we were talking about strong beers and stuff. And I was talking about my buddies that own Wildcard Brewing up in Trenton, and they had a barrel aged quad that they put in barrels in 2018, and they just released it this year. So it had been aging for years, literal years in barrels. And I bought three the first day I was there, and then before I left town, I went back and bought the entire rest of their stock because it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, I love like you. I love Belgian beers. I love the dark fruit flavors and the heavy caramel and all those flavors. And then you age it in a bourbon barrel for 4 friggin' years, and you get just a whole new level of complexity for
yeah,
those flavors, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. I do have the same problem that you have a lot of the time. If it's a new beer, I have to make sure I buy at least 4 of them, because the first 2 I'm just going to drink and analyze. And then the,
yeah,
the second 2 I will actually sit back and just enjoy.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a good thing, but at the same time, it's a bad thing. It costs a lot more.
It
I actually
does.
I just think I went out and bought another 5 bottles of the Orville that's been going around right now. I'm trying to buy as many of them as possible. You don't get those too often, so definitely take advantage of what you can.
Yeah.
Um,
I Go ahead.
Sorry, we were just talking about the Belgian beer. How you're saying, the barrel aged, which is something I'm not actually very popular. I'm not sorry, not really into, for the fact that I find some of them are too strong.
Mm-hmm.
The bourbon comes out too much. Perhaps the tequila, the rum. I had a really nice one today from Sean and Ed's Brewing. Big Mac is called, I believe, and it was a Baltic porter in a rum barrel. And again, the rum nice and subtle, not overpowering. The sweetness doesn't come out, but really nice, very nice. Well done to them, I have to admit.
Yeah, for people who might not be familiar, Baltic Porter is actually just another name that's synonymous with an imperial stout. It's just from the region that it's brewed in. It's called a Baltic Porter. Uh, if you want to know the history of stouts, I think I've got 5 other episodes on stouts where we talk about where stouts and porters originally came from and things like that. But yeah, Baltic porters, when done right, are fantastic. Barrel aged beers, when done right, are fantastic. But I understand where you're coming from, where you're not a huge fan of the barrel aged beers. We've had this discussion before when
Hmm.
we were in class and things. I'm a huge fan of big beers. I love the big heavy hitting double digit beers. I love to be able to be one and done with a beer. If I don't there's times when you just don't want to sit on the porch and drink 6 beers to feel the effects. Sometimes you just want to have one and like, oh yeah, now I'm feeling
Yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and especially at this time of the year when it's still light out to a nice certain time. It's not super hot. You got that nice cool breeze in the night. Throw the sweater on. Perhaps you have to have an outdoor fire or something. Yeah, definitely the complexities of some of those Belgian beers, or even any strong ale is
Yeah.
strong beer. I shouldn't just say Belgian, because even here in Ontario, we're making some great high end, high octane beers.
Oh yeah, most
So
definitely. Pretty much everything I've been buying lately has just been domestic, craft beers. So it's all been Ontario based stuff, and you know uh one of the things I do miss from living in the States is the sheer volume of craft breweries that I had access to.
mhm.
But I gotta say, Ontario is picking up slack, and there are so many craft breweries up here now that if you can't find a craft brewery that you like their stuff, you need to find a new place to live, because there are so many of them.
Yeah,
I was just talking on my last episode that where I live, within 30 minutes of me, there's at least half a dozen craft breweries, and if I expand that out to an hour, it's probably 3 or 4 times that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you say that. I should say it's funny that you say it, because craft beer is big, but Me personally, I'm into actually just beer, not just craft beer. This is one discussion that we've had it in class, and
Yep.
I find a lot of the people in the craft industry have blinders on. If it's not craft beer, especially Ontario craft beer, I'm not going to drink it. For instance, we just talked about Orville, or any Trappist ale. To me, they're some of the finest craft beers in the world. Um,
Absolutely.
you know, so just because it's not a craft beer that you think of here in Ontario, some people just have to sometimes open up that lane and let a few beers in here once in a while. Which is, I love that, the support for local beer is 100% is fantastic. But if you're really going to get into this business, like yourself and myself, you do have to expand. You can't just be strictly 100% craft, because there is a lot of craft out there that's really, and
Mediocre.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
there's a lot of great beers and a lot of beers. And it's the same within the huge market, right?
Yep.
Molson makes some great beers, and they make some awful beers as well. So, but this is one thing that we try in Prud'homme, and not only in Prud'homme, me talking, when I'm talking as the ball beer guy in beers as well, I like to make sure that people are trying, beers, not just craft beer.
Right.
Because like I said, there's so many out there that, we are lucky being having an LCBO, because they're the biggest producer of, biggest buyer of beer and spirits in the world. So some of the beers, like for instance, Orville, out of 100% of the beers, 70% of the beers of Orville are kept in the monastery. The other 25% stays in Belgium, and then 5% gets exported around the world. So, like, to actually get your hands on this beer is phenomenal. And that's just one of the Belgian Trappists. Never mind, beers from Australia, beers from Japan that we've had.
Yep.
So when you walk into that liquor store, it's great. Because I used to sit there and manage the LCBO and the beer, and I used to have it beautiful. Here's your Ontario section, but at the same time, I made sure that we had a phenomenal imported section as well.
Yeah.
And then again, this is what we do in the Prud'homme beer certification, is that we like to do true to style beers.
Yep.
It's easy to make a New England IPA. You're making a beer, you screw up, we'll throw in some more hops and add the extra Boyle or whatever you want to do. Now you got an IPA. To make a Pilsner, a little bit more difficult, right? You as a brewer, there's no hiding flaws in a Pilsner. So
There is not.
When I walk into a craft brewery or any brewery around, and they have a Pilsner on tap, the very first thing I will do is I will order that Pilsner, because if they make that Pilsner very well, I know they can brew. Because like I said, there is no hiding any flaws in a Pilsner. So, like I said, if we can stick to some true to styles, and a lot of that's the great thing about craft, is that you don't have to stick true to styles. But for people who are into this business, you have to start drinking some of these true to style beers to know what those flavors are like, and then you can build from there. And so it's
most definitely. I mean, you have to know what the baseline is supposed to be before you can know what the variants are going to be. I was drinking earlier today when I got home from work. I was having Krabby's alcoholic ginger beer. Not a craft beer at all, but it's a fantastic light brew. It's 4%, so I could have a couple of them and wasn't going to be totally trash for recording the episode I did before this one or this one. I've got Guinness out in my cooler, because Guinness is just a great everyday stout. It's low alcohol, it's decently flavored, and it's a good beer. I mean, and Orville, like you said, Orville, another one, fantastic beer if you can get it. Right now I am drinking craft beer. I am drinking the Henderson Rush Canadian Golden Ale, which is another great, simple, quote unquote, simple style beer. I mean, it's a nice golden ale. It's light, it's flavorful. It's one of those beers that this would be a great gateway beer if you have a friend who's hesitant to try craft beer because all they've ever had is your macros. Something like this would be a great gateway beer. Here, try this. It's similar in style to your Miller and your Bud, but it's going to have a little more flavor.
Yeah.
And that's my whole shtick. And we've talked about this before. That's my whole thing, is just trying to get people to expand their horizons and try
Yes.
new beers. And the Prud'homme thing is very much about that as well. It's about trying all these different true to style beers, so you know what's out there, and you can tell other people, yeah, this is a style you might like, because you might know your friends' flavors. Or
Yeah.
you can go into a place and go like, that's not one of my favorite styles of beers. That style, however, is. So I'll give that one a try. And that's the beautiful thing about the programs like Prud'homme.
Yeah. I agree on that. Because I remember our fourth session of the class, we do get into Belgian beers. And I remember the class that you were in, every one of you were, there wasn't a lot of people that had actually had some of the beers that we tried that night. So it's great seeing people's expressions, when they're trying brand new beer that is not a craft beer.
Yep.
The Dutch's de Boyle, there's a flavor of balsamic vinegar in a beer.
Yes.
Right. And people are like, what? Are we supposed to drink this? But once it mellows out, the sweetness comes through, and it's absolutely a phenomenal tasting beer. So a lot of people see that, and they drink that for the first time. And, and if it's not at the right temperature, there's another thing, drinking beers,
Yeah,
like
most definitely.
People don't drink beers at the proper temperature. Therefore, you're losing out on so many flavors and aromas, and that's a shame. As we talked about some of these Belgian beers and, the higher octane, people have to realize that, leave them out of your fridge for an hour. Don't keep them in the back of that same fridge that you keep your milk and your butter in. Have your separate little area, perhaps downstairs or even in the cold cellar. So
Yep.
Again, this is the nice thing about Prud'homme. If we want to get back to that a little bit, about how we talking about, proper glassware. Don't stick your glass in the freezer, for instance. A lot of people do that. They don't realize once you pour your beer in it, the little beer molecules are going to break, expand. All your CO2 is going to leave out of your beer. On next minute, you're drinking a flat beer. Again, your temperature, make sure it's at the proper temperature. We teach that in the class. We teach you how to actually taste properly, from sniffing right around, instead of just grabbing a beer and just sticking it down. We give it the swirl. We make sure we're smelling from each different angles of the glass. How we taste things. And to be honest, I think it's one of these programs that, if you're going to get into beer, is very well worth taking it, for the fact that if you're into that business, especially working in a brewery, you can come across knowing what you're talking about. I imagine this happened to yourself, Rob, walking into a brewery. You ask about the beers, and they're just going, "Oh, they're hoppy, or they're good."
Yeah.
Really?
Well, what was it? The first night of the class that we were in, the first night of the first class, you're like, don't describe a beer as malty. Don't describe a beer as hoppy. Try and delve into the flavors a little bit farther. You can say, like, I tend to say I like beers with a heavy malt backbone, but
Absolutely.
I like them because they are sweet and they are bready, or they have that caramel flavor, or they have the grainy flavors to them. That's what I really like about the beers. So I try not to say, oh yeah, it's a nice malty beer. I try to say it's got a malt forward profile, or it's got a malty backbone, and here's the flavors that go with it.
Yeah. And
it's the same thing with hops.
Exactly. There's hundreds of different hops. So to say a beer is hoppy, I understand where most people are coming from. It's usually the bitterness and that strong hop flavor. So I understand where they're coming from. The malty is the bad one, for the fact that, you can have your black chocolate malt right down to your Pilsner malt. There's two totally different malts and two different tastes, as you know. So that's the one that we like to, my three rules are: nothing's hoppy, nothing's malty, and we never describe the color as yellow. Beer is never yellow.
That's right.
For the fact that something else that comes out of your body is yellow, we don't want to, describe the same thing.
Yeah, this is not
exactly.
Yellow.
Yeah.
Even though the lighting in here makes it actually, if you were to hold this beer and look at it in person, this is more of a golden honey colored beer. It is not yellow,
Yeah.
or you might have a straw colored beer. It's not
Straw.
yellow.
Yeah. Never yellow. Never yellow. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, that's the kind of things that we push in Prud'homme. And another big thing is Roger Mittag, who's been on your show.
Yep.
He actually is the founder of Prud'homme. Great mind when it comes to beer. He's trying to push something that's really big in my heart as well, is restaurants and bars just out there having their lines cleaned on a regular basis and get the public health involved. Right now, you can walk into any bar, brewery, and they don't have to have their lines cleaned. They don't have to have a date on the wall saying when their lines are cleaned. There's no inspection in the keg room saying, hey, you have mold growing out of your keg room. Then they're going to shut you down, which is bad, because beer's not going to kill you. It is going to make you sick as hell, but it won't kill you. So therefore, what we should be doing is trying to get some type of public health in there saying, hey, you know what? These people aren't cleaning their lines. People are getting sick from dirty lines, or, mold that's transferring into the beer. So let's make sure that all these places that are selling the product, first of all, if you're selling, be it Molson's, be it Great Lakes Brewing, be it Fairweather, be it anybody, you want to represent their beer the best they can. So having clean lines, having proper glassware, in my opinion, having the whole package, it is best for the beer business. So again, that's something that I know Roger would love to be able to get to the point where, draft lines and the public health involved. But it seems like that's just, you're banging down a 6-foot cement door, right? That's not going nowhere, unfortunately.
It's fantastic. One of my local hangouts is Flux Brewing in Scotland, Ontario, which is they're literally 10 minutes down the road from me. They have very prominently displayed at the bar, our lines were last cleaned on, and they have the date, which is fantastic. I love when you walk into a place and they have, and it doesn't have to be a brewery that has, any bar that has the last time we had our lines cleaned. You're going to get the best quality taste out of your beer. And I agree 100% that public health should be involved in that, because I mean, it's a food product. If they're involved, if they're involved in the kitchen side of stuff, they should be involved in the beer side of serving as well. And it should be regulated to a point to where, like, they can come in and do snap inspections, and hey, your shit's dirty, clean this shit up or we're shutting you down. I 100% agree. You're going to get the best flavor out of a beer if it's coming from clean lines.
Yeah. And, clean lines, clean glassware, that's a big thing that we teach, making sure that there's a difference between clean glasses and beer clean. You see a lot of these commercials, not so much nowadays, but back in the day, you would see a beer sitting in a commercial with all these bubbles coming up and clinging to the side of the glass. Well, that's just a damn dirty glass. That if I got served that right now, I'd be saying, hey, can I get a new beer? I'd be sending it back. So, glassware is a big thing. And one thing, again, that we try to push in Prud'homme, well, I shouldn't say Prud'homme because I'm using them. I use the platform to push kind of what I think as well, is I spent 20 years in the restaurant business. So customer service is very big to me. Nothing bothers me now than when you walk into, perhaps a restaurant, not so much a brewery, but a restaurant, you ask for beer and then they just put it in front of you, no glassware. Is it opened? I don't know. Sometimes, yeah. But then the person who's buying the little glass of wine that's half the price of your beer is getting a little, try this. Oh, is it nice for you? Okay. And then we'll top up the glass and away they go. Meanwhile, you're standing there with a can of beer hoping that you have a glass. Then they come back and they give you an 8-ounce rock glass.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you ask for another glass and then your beer's bad. Now you look like the idiot or the prick because you have a dirty glass and you want to send it back. But again, we're paying now $10, $12 for a beer in most restaurants. And so expect good service, expect good beer. Make sure
Yeah.
we have branded glasses. Nothing worse than, ordering Great Lakes Brewing a beautiful Octopus Wants to Fight, IPA, and all of a sudden you get it in a Budweiser glass. Like, if I was Great Lakes Brewing, I'd be pissed for the fact that I'm now advertising, a Bud Light. If I want to take an Instagram photo, or, so many people are into social media now, it should be in the proper branded glassware. Go to Belgium. You were to serve something in a wrong glass, you probably won't have a job within an hour. Everything's coaster branded glassware. When they put it in front of you, they turn it towards you. They check on it and make sure your first sip's good. It's beer is now, it's no longer the beer for the masses. Hey, I'll take a draft.
Yep.
Back in the day, you walked in, I'll take a draft, and they just poured you something. Now it's, you got to know what's going on, and the people behind the bar should know what's going on. Most importantly.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree 100%. There's nothing more frustrating than going to a brewery and you find out immediately that they hired people who have, one, either no interest in beer, or two, have no idea about any styles of beer. It's like, oh, well, what's this beer? What's the flavor profile on that? Oh, I don't know. Or, oh, it's an IPA, so it's going to be hoppy. Great. Is there anyone who knows what this beer actually tastes like?
Yeah.
That's a very frustrating thing.
And it's, the worst part is that, a lot of people who are behind the counter, they have no idea who they're serving, what their background is. An example, I don't walk into a brewery and shout that, I've went through level 4 Prud'homme, and I'm a master beer sommelier. I walk in and just want a beer. So, when I ask, and then people are shouting back to me false comment, I'm just thinking, wow, if you don't know what you're talking about, just shut up. Don't start lying, because again, the person on the other side, you have no idea who that person is. So I've caught people in a complete lie, and I sit there thinking, okay, do I call them out on it, or do I just not visit them again?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, it's a shame, because, some guy or some person behind the bar is just, if they don't know, it's not a shame not to know. This is, for instance, this is why Prud'homme's here. A lot of breweries have internal training.
Yep.
And if they don't, well, they should be getting some training for sure, because, for us that kind of walk in and we know the business, it is very frustrating when that person hasn't a clue. And for instance, if it's the very first time you've walked into the brewery, hey, I've traveled 3 hours and I'm coming, I just happen to find you guys on, a certain map, and I come in and what do you have on tap? I really don't know. We got some hoppy beer and some other beer. Okay, well, guess what? I'm gone.
Yeah, no, I feel very much the same way. If you're not gonna take the time to invest enough time in your staff to get them to understand, to at least be able to say, oh, well, this is a New England IPA, so it should be kind of juicy. Okay, great. That's at least better than saying, I don't know, it's an IPA, or I have no problem if the server's like, honestly, I don't know what the flavor profile on this is. Let me go ask somebody who might know. That would be fantastic. Other than just going, I don't know, that there's nothing more frustrating that. And it's not just at breweries. It's even like at restaurants or in bars. If you ask somebody what a beer flavor, what's this flavor like on this beer? If they can't tell you, well, then maybe I'm going to a different bar, or maybe I'm going to a different restaurant.
Yeah. And especially, I can understand, some restaurants, some of these, these trendy restaurants, they're selling craft beer just to, fit in. And, if every server doesn't know, the complete profile of every beer they have, that's okay. Don't BS us, just say, I don't know. Should every server know a profile of every beer they carry? Like, for instance, in Beer Town, that's pretty difficult, because they do
that'd
carry,
be a little tough,
right? You got thousands, you want hundreds, right? So, So you can cut it away. But my big thing again is breweries. That's all you do is you brew beer. So have the brewer come out and tell you the flavor profiles, because they write it on the side of the can. They write it in their descriptions on their menu or whatever. Um, but I'll tell you one thing that really bothers me is when they consider themselves a craft beer bar. Um, and then you walk in and the first thing you see is every brewery that's owned by the big boys that were once, they're still craft, but they're now owned by the big fellas.
Right.
So is that still a craft beer? Depending on who it is. For instance, Creemore, I think they are. Creemore still has, the beautiful water from the Creemore spring. So nothing's really changed other than they're not now owned by Molson's. Lagunitas, I think they've changed quite dramatically, ever since the big boys bought them.
Yeah.
So these craft beer bars, you have to kind of like, are you a craft beer bar, or are you a beer bar? We have a couple good ones here in Hamilton. Mosaic, for instance, really good place, great selection, and it's great. And I've had three of their owners actually in my Prud'homme Level 1 class. So there's some people that are taking initiative in a restaurant, making sure that they know how to pronounce beers. But getting back to another thing in restaurants is the order of service is surprising, which we've talked about in Prud'homme. A lot of next time, people who are watching the show, next time you're in a restaurant, watch if you order a draft beer and the people at your table, if they order a cocktail or whatever, there is a level of service that's supposed to be done. And 90% of the time they will pour our draft beer first because it's the easiest for the bartender. And then what happens is our beer sits on that counter for 5, 6, 7 minutes. And then they come by with a little straw, give it a little shake, or they dump a little bit out and pour in, and they're basically adding more CO2 to our beer to make it flatter. So again, another thing Prud'homme does is we teach, level of service and which the proper order of service. Draft beer should be the last one poured, your red wine first, because it's already sitting on the counter. So pour your red wine first, then make your cocktail, then your wine, and then your draft beer. And again, bars that know that, and craft beer bars that know that should be doing this. So that's my little spiel about hospitality, because, like I said, me being in it for that many years, I notice a lot of things when I sit down. My eyes are always looking around and seeing how people serve this great beverage of ours.
Yeah, and honestly, if you're someone who's watching this show and you're considering getting into a career that has anything to do with beer, craft or otherwise, if you're in Canada, look at the Prud'homme certifications, because it'll help you do your job better. And if you're in the States, look at the Cicerone stuff, because same thing, it'll help you know your job better. And the better you know your job, the better you can serve your clientele, and the better you're going to do, because if you know your shit, people are going to tip you better if you're giving them proper advice.
That's the big thing, Rob, right there is the money. Comes down to service. If you can sit there and talk beer to people while they're having and enjoying a beer, man, they're just going to sit there and just throw money at you.
Yep. I'm one of those people that will do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at breweries now on a Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. They're the busiest bars. They're the busiest bars in Ontario. Is breweries now. They're absolutely jam packed. Definitely. If people are interested in Prud'homme, it's prud'homme.ca. PRUD''HOMME beer certification. And like I said, we have some all in Toronto, Niagara region. We have them online. Levels 1, 2, and 3 are all online. Definitely go check it out. It's a great program. I swear by it. Roger's always, hey, relax, just settle down. But I'm Gusto, and I here I am always talking Prud'homme, and and I didn't even really shout out to my own the bald beer guy at all.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if it
I
wasn't
was gonna I was gonna say something about your shirt, but I hadn't gotten there yet.
yeah. But again, if it wasn't for Prud'homme, I wouldn't have this.
Yeah. No,
So
I agree. I mean, I took the level 1 class. I intend on taking the level 2 class if next time it's offered. For me, there's nothing that's super close to me. So like if it's offered again, like I took it at Clifford Brewing in Hamilton, which was great because it's a real easy drive. It's still 45 minutes away from me, but it's a real easy drive for me to get there. If the level 2 or even level 3 is offered in the Hamilton area, I'd be more inclined to take them because I really enjoyed the level 1 class. I mean, I already have a pretty extensive background in beer, but it's great to I did learn some things I didn't know. 2, I was able to share what I do know with other people who didn't necessarily know. And then, you get to meet people who are similarly minded, and you can make some great friends in it as well. And then, like in my class, he was also on my show. Drunk Pokeroo was in the same class I was in, and he's been on my show. And he's a huge beer fanatic, and I mean, he really knows his shit when it comes to beer too. But for him, taking the class was also one of those things that we're both these beer nerds, and we took the class because we want to know as much as we can about beer and the differences in beer and how to describe beer properly and serve beer properly and be able to tell other people who might not necessarily have that level of knowledge, hey, you might like this beer because it's got this flavor and it's similar to this style. And being able to articulate that and taking a class that helps you articulate that is phenomenal.
You know what? That's some really kind words, Rob. I appreciate that. And like you said, yeah, Drunk Pokeroo, he's pretty well known in the social media world. When you were actually, it's funny because I remember he took a sip of a couple of beers, and watching his face was like, "Whoa, this is something I've never experienced before." And for me to see him never having that style of beer because he's had thousands of beers. Just look at his Instagram page. Every beer is possibly, you think, and all of a sudden you see this guy who he's like a little kid because he's never had this beer. And I remember even seeing your face on sometimes. It was just great, just thinking like, wow. And then, but what gets me about my biggest joy is teaching, is hearing things like that. What you just said, Rob, is the great feedback of enjoying the class, learning stuff from a person who already knows beer, but also the camaraderie, like you said, the social aspect of it. I still talk to people from my level 1 and level 2 class that I had. I just had a week and a half ago, 10 days ago, we had a little level 4, a bunch of graduates. We all got together and did a sensory training on dark fruits that Roger led. So, a couple of guys in my level 4 class were there. So it was, great seeing them again. And again, through social media, you're constantly talking with people. But getting back to level 2, Robbie, is that I just spoke to Sean and Ed's Brewing today, and I've possibly will be going to Dundas in October for level 2.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we're hoping to probably run it for the first through October, November, and then the first 2 weeks into December. Just going to do some emails, and hopefully that's going to get settled. So level 2 should be coming to the Hamilton area very shortly.
Excellent. Well, if it pans out, I will be there.
Okay, that sounds awesome. I'd love to see you. Love to see you there.
Well, Scott, we've been talking for about 45 minutes, and this is the point of the show where I say, hey, if you've enjoyed what you've been listening to and watching, please click like or subscribe to the channel, and maybe click the little bell to be notified. If you're really generous, share this channel with other people who might find it interesting, or who are into beer, or who you'd like to try to get into beer, because that's the whole premise of this channel. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. If you have any questions for Scott, how can people get a hold of you? Where are you at on the socials?
I am at the Bald Beer Guy CDN for Canadians. So some guy in America stole my damn Bald Beer Guy. So I am the CDN Bald Beer Guy on Instagram or the Bald Beer Guy on Facebook. Yeah, hook me up. I do some private beer and cheese pairings. I just talk beer. So yeah, look me up. Look me up. Follow me. Cheers.
And you can always leave comments below, and if there's something meant for Scott, I can forward it on to him because he and I are friends on the socials. If you have a suggestion for a beer style or a particular beer you'd like me to cover on the show, or a guest you'd like me to try to get on, because I will try my damnedest to get anybody on this show. Ryan Reynolds, if you happen to be watching this, I'm still waiting for your response. Other than that, hey, I'm Rob from the internet. Cheers.
Cheers, Rob.